On January 9th, the first person died of coronavirus in Wuhan, China. Then on April 10th, some 92 days later, the 100,000th person died of the virus. That's quite a significant growth. So in this video, we're going to explain how we got here. If you didn't know, we've just announced Season 4 of our PIN badges, which includes England, Ireland, Mexico, Poland, Finland, Bulgaria, Cyprus, Japan, Romania and Russia. You can pre-order any of these designs or the full season in our store right now. A link to that can be found in the description. Before we dive into the deep analysis, let's take a look at the bar chart race of how the death toll adjusted throughout the 10 most affected countries. So if you came here just to watch the graph shuffle about, you're free to go now. But let's discuss how the virus spread around the world, how we reached 100,000 deaths, and what this means for the future of the virus's spread. In another video, I ran through the first 23,000 deaths that occurred between January 9th and March 27th. Since then, the death toll has quadrupled, and the effect on some countries has multiplied more significantly. So let's recap what happened in the first couple of months, and then go into more detail about the last few weeks, when the virus's death toll really ramped up. As we said, it was January 9th when the first fatality happened, but it wasn't until the 21st that the World Health Organization started releasing their official data. 3 days later, on February 24th, Wuhan, the city where the virus was discovered, was placed under lockdown. By this point, the virus was already spreading throughout the world, but as of the 24th, 10 of the 11 international cases were from people who'd recently visited Wuhan. That slowly began to shift as more cases emerged around the world, and the virus began to spread. That being said, all of the deaths continued to be in China for a while. That was until mid-February, when a handful of deaths started appearing around the rest of the world, with the first European death occurring in France around the middle of the month. Despite this, China's death toll continued to be considerably higher than every other country for quite some time. While its death toll was still low, it was around the 23rd of February that Italy began really clamping down on the virus. At this point, the country had suffered fatalities. Cases were beginning to ramp up, with 76 cases in the country. In reaction, the government was starting to shut down events and large gatherings. In the beginning of March, Iran and Italy began to emerge as the two countries outside China being worst hit by the virus. On March 8th, Italy locked down its worst affected region, and Iran's cases reached 5,823. Only 3 days later, the World Health Organization declared the virus a pandemic. Throughout March, Spain began to really start suffering, with the country first entering the top 10 on March 6th, before rapidly climbing to 4th within a few days. On March 15th, Spain reached a record number of deaths, 100 in one day. But unfortunately for the nation, this climb was only just beginning. Italy also continued to see its death toll rise, despite continued and expanding lockdowns. On March 9th, the country announced a national lockdown, but by March 20th, the country overtook China. Speaking of China, it's worth rewinding a little. Throughout January and February, their death rate was significantly higher than any other country, with the nation declaring over 100 new deaths most days throughout February. But when the month came to an end, so did this trend. China pretty rapidly seemed to slow the spread of the virus, and with it, slow the rate of deaths. This meant that throughout March, they stopped pushing the graph forward, and other countries were able to catch up quickly. Now the question is if we can trust this data. Some simply don't believe that China was able to make this kind of miraculous turnaround, something we actually discuss in another video. Anyway, as March continued, China continued to slide down the graph, and you'll see them fall down the list as the days go on. Towards the end of the month, Spain really sees its death toll spike, with the country reporting a record number of deaths for successive days throughout the end of March. Around the same time, the United States also saw their death toll rise significantly, with the country's relatively lax approach to the disease seemingly coming to bear. Because of this, the US found themselves as the third most affected country by the beginning of April, with the country reporting over 1,000 deaths a day every day since April 3rd. This meant that the US was declaring more cases than almost any other country, with their death toll nearly double the second highest country on some days in early April. France was also being hit hard in this period. France has been high on the list for a while by this point, but by the beginning of April, the country's death toll had really amped up, with the country reporting 2,003 new deaths on April 4th. The United Kingdom also saw a continued rise throughout this entire time period, with the UK reporting hundreds of deaths every day throughout April. This graph is super interesting, and I think it tells a good story, but with the constantly moving scale, it can be hard to track how big some of these numbers are. Over the last couple of weeks, the total number of deaths has really escalated, as has the total number of cases. The latest World Health Organization data, the report from April 9th, at 85,521, but data from Johns Hopkins University, which updates more regularly, puts the total over 100,000. Looking at the Johns Hopkins data, the breakdown is as follows. Interestingly, the Johns Hopkins data breaks down the United States deaths by region, and because of that, we can see that the number of deaths in New York City alone exceeds 5,000, which would put them above Iran on the country chart. As we mentioned earlier, some do doubt the validity of these numbers. There's doubt surrounding the Chinese data, but even in the rest of the world, it's not easy to calculate. With the stress that health services have been placed under, it's not easy to track every death, or even identify how everyone's died, meaning that deaths outside of hospitals aren't being effectively tracked. The milestone is still important though. It's a clear sign of the severity of the virus. There may have been 92 days between death 1 and 100,000, but the rate of deaths has significantly risen in recent days, and that's expected to continue. Some countries have been able to flatten the curve, but others have been less successful. Even in those successful countries, the deaths tend to lag behind the total number of cases, so we could continue to see deaths rise. To put the numbers in perspective, ministers in the UK are talking about the country potentially facing 100,000 deaths, and emergency planners in the UK are bracing for up to 315,000. So, while 100,000 globally is certainly a huge number, it is expected to rise a fair bit higher. Which means for now, you need to continue sitting tight. Lockdowns around the world are being extended, and the vast majority of the world needs to be cautious, remain inside, and people need to keep washing their hands. As fun as hand washing is, you might find yourself a little bored and intellectually understimulated in the next few weeks. If you could get involved in the conversation over on Discord. There's a link to our server down below, and by joining, you can take part in discussion about all kinds of topics, from US politics and their 2020 election, to gaming and philosophy. Join the approaching 2,000 people on the server today, who are discussing a variety of topics from a variety of perspectives. You can also discuss our videos, and if you're a patron, you can access super exclusive bonus channels where you can talk to Team TLDR and other patrons. You can check out the Discord by clicking the link in the description. If you want to be updated on the coronavirus as the issue plays out, then be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a video. You can also find more from us across all social networks simply by searching for TLDR News. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible.